one of the major issues we have in this country is that media agencies love bad news, they hate good news. So unfortunately the negative narrative has been quite heavy lately, but we're here to do something on the positive side of that.
And it's much needed. Thank you.
Hi, as Ashley said, I'm Martin Cullip. I'm chair of the New Nicotine Alliance. We're a registered charity, a consumer association, and we're dedicated to advocate for the more availability of safer nicotine products. I mean, that includes obviously e-cigarettes mostly, but also products such as snus, heated tobacco, and things that are much lower in risk than cigarettes. We're seeing a threat from what's happening in the US currently, as John said, poor media around it, and so we're happy to support this campaign. We will have our own separate campaign launching in the next couple of weeks on the same subject, because it is a serious threat which we're hoping to discuss here, and we all have to do our bit, and consumers most especially.
Hello. My name's Dan Marchant. I'm one of the co-owners of Vape. It's a big distribution company, as you know. Why am I here? Why am I talking? Well, we get tarred with the same brush as big tobacco quite often. And what I'm seeing at the moment, we've got thousands of accounts. On average, they seem to be about 30% down over the last couple of months. And this is a very serious problem, because if we look at the latest ASH figures, there was 3.6 million vapers at the start of September. The problem you've got is if everybody's about 30% down, that kind of the easy correlation there is that there could be 1.2 million vapers who've gone back to smoking because of this news. And it's a fucking outrage. We're not big tobacco. Yeah, we are, I started vaping 6 years ago. I was a smoker. I used it to change my life. I'm a huge advocate for the harm reduction abilities of this product. And to think that the scare stories and the misinformation are driving people back to a habit that we know will kill half of them is an outrage. And I think we need to come together as an industry and do everything we can to try and correct this. Our reputation's been, destroyed in the matter of hours, really. And it's taken years to build it up. And we've taken 10 steps backwards, and we have to now try and build that reputation back again and push the correct information out. And we don't have the support of the media. They don't want to print stories that are positive, because it doesn't sell advertising, it doesn't sell papers. So it's down to us now.
Yes. So, over the last few months in the U.S., city by county, by state, federally, we've been dealing with nothing but not only flavor bans, but with the regulations. And I've personally been meeting with Los Angeles County officials. We went with the Vaper Technology Association and took meetings on the Hill. Now, of course, we're giving them viable solutions, right? We're trying to make it 21 and up, harsher restrictions as far as online, put a point of sale system at every single counter so that, for the 21 and up shops, it's a second age verification. No advertising on the front of the stores. We're trying to give them viable options. What are some suggestions that you could have for the U.S. of different ways that moving forward, where is our tipping point of where can we be solutions based, and what are we not doing? What are we missing?
Well, I think one of the challenges that the US market has is their view on nicotine itself. Over here, we're very lucky that regulators have separated smoking from nicotine consumption, so that they're targeting people who are smoking here, and nicotine consumption, that's fine, it doesn't cause cancer. It's, in the most part, it's not an issue.
Because in the U.S. we consider e-liquid a tobacco product, even though there's no tobacco in it.
Correct. I think the other big issue that you're facing over there is this overinflated youth vaping epidemic.
Let's talk about that. So, and because epidemic is such a heavy word, right?
Yep.
Now, if we look across, statistically in the U.S., and I'm just Southern California, if I think of some of the numbers, we've got about 35% of teens, and also this is up to 18, so we're thinking, I think it's 14 to 18 that they pool these people. 35% drink alcohol. 15% have undiagnosed mental health issues, which I think is worth noting. 30% have potentially used types of cannabis products, and then I think it's about 10 to 13% have used vaping products. But we don't know, and we can't get our hands on these stats because when they say vaping, we can't be sure it's nicotine vaping or if it's THC vaping. So that right there is a big issue. But so touching on that with the epidemic, how do you view that from over here? Because I don't see an epidemic here in the UK. I don't have any. I've never had problems internationally. So obviously I know, but tell me, what are we doing wrong over there?
Well, one of the things you've got to look at, as you said, they're not making these numbers really clear and open. But I agree. What we're seeing there is they're looking at normal use as being, have you tried a vaping device in the last 30 days? Whereas here we look at is if you've used a device every week, then you're a regular user. Over there it's once every 30 days. So for me, that's normal teen use. That's trial.
That makes sense, right?
It makes sense. They do it with alcohol. They do it with other things. I agree. Cannabis is a big thing over there. Again, we don't know how many of those vapors are using cannabis products versus tobacco. But if you look at the numbers here, we have about 1.6% of young people vaping here.
That is a very low number.
That's a very low number, and most of those actually smoked prior to vaping.
I was curious, do you have the tobacco statistics?
My understanding is about 60% of those previously smoked. So we've got very, very low numbers. But again, I think that's because the government here has been pushing vaping as a safer alternative or less harmful alternative to smoking. So for young people, there isn't that panache to try it, to rebel and do something that you'd be told is bad for you. And one thing I noticed is if you take a look at Juul's share of market, for instance, when the FDA started pushing this, they were about 52-53% market share. Now they're 70-odd%. So the FDA is doing a very good job of pushing Juul, in my mind, for free advertising.
Interesting observation.
I think John's right there. It's in this country, it's seen that e-cigarettes are used in, are shown in the Stoptober campaign and things like that. So they're seen as a smoking cessation product by the government. That's good in some respects, but bad in others, because when these threats come from America, people who would like to see e-cigarettes solely as a medicinal product, this gives them a chance to get their agenda going. I mean, on the 15th of this month, the Victoria Derbyshire show had an MP on there, Glyn Davis, who came out and said we need to examine the sale of flavoured nicotine products. Now, this wouldn't have come about if it wasn't what's happening in the US and all the media headlines that have come out of that. So, a lot of legislators and a lot of public health professionals can't understand why all these products should not be medicinal products. That's what they want. They don't see any reason why they shouldn't be. And they say everything would be solved. You could prescribe them, you could advertise them, everything would be fine if only you made them medicinal products, which means they don't really understand the products at all. They don't understand the attraction or anything like that. So, we as the NNA go in and we talk to MPs, we talk to policymakers quite a lot and try and get across to them that flavours are very important. And people aren't sick when they're smoking. They don't see themselves as sick. They don't want to go to a clinic. So we have to sort of show them that you can't go around ban flavours and expect these things to carry on as normal. This is why we're asking consumers to try and help out with this. With one thing about Glyn Davis, the MP, he's on our side, believe it or not. He's on the all-party parliamentary group for vaping. So he's a good guy, and yet he's saying we need to look at the sale of flavoured products. So if you don't want all this lot gone, please take some of these signs and post them around. Vaping matters, hashtag vaping matters, get them on social media, get this thing hopefully trending, and just get the idea out there that it's the flavours that help to keep people from relapsing to smoking.
And it's so interesting because if you go on the FDA website, there is articles and they do acknowledge that flavors play a crucial role in helping people move away from combustible tobacco. But it's a completely different story when you're dealing with the policymakers in cities and counties and state by state because, they're allowing them to make these decisions. So it's like, it's like talking to a wall sometimes, trying to address flavors. And I'm sure every single vapor here has some kind of flavor, and maybe it's a flavored tobacco. But I think we all know, at least on the showroom floor, how important flavors play into a role in moving away from traditional tobacco. So please.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, the flavour issue. We know that youth access has absolutely nothing to do with flavours.
Yes, we
I
do.
guarantee you there are not millions of children in America who are unable to resist the taste of anything mango that you put in front of them. I promise you. Right? The reason that children try these products is the reason that we started smoking when we were kids and we were drinking alcohol when we were kids. It's, kids want to be grown up. They want to do things that grown-ups do. And to demonise a product that is potentially saving the lives of millions and millions of people because kids are trying it is ridiculous. If you're going to demonise anything, demonise the place where they're buying it from. Demonise the retailers or the friends or the brothers or the people that are giving them these products. This is where the issue lies. We don't have enforcement and on a large scale about the brick and mortar stores, the online stores. There was a thing that Trading Standards did recently, and obviously on that same Victoria Derbyshire programme it was, oh God, 40%. But when you talk to the guy from Trading Standards, he goes, well, yeah, this pretty much matches up to the same problems we have with tobacco and with alcohol, with pornography and knives and acid and all the other age-restricted products out there. This isn't a problem with the product, this is a problem with retail. And obviously there's a lot of retailers in this room. I'm one of them. And we need to be incredibly careful about our age verification processes. If we don't let the children get hold of the products, they're not using the products. You know, we also have, you know, the extra added bonus that we only have a 20 milligram limit, which when it first came in, you know, we weren't very pleased about. But actually, we look back now and think, thank fuck for that, because we know that a lot of the reason that the kids are getting into these products in the States is that 50, 60 milligrams of nicotine, when you're a smaller body mass, you haven't built up a nicotine tolerance, it's a little brief head high. Now, I'm not saying that those products are not good for adult smokers, but you can understand why the children are getting into them and not the big, you know, 3 milligram, you know, cloud chasing mods. They're easy, they're discreet, and they make you feel all funny. Like when we first started smoking, you'd smoke a fag and you'd get a little buzz, wouldn't you? It's the same thing. Kids haven't changed. But what we need to do is, we're not in 1975 or 1982 anymore. People don't want kids using these products. We especially don't want kids using this product because it undermines all the good that we're doing for adult smokers out there. And it's down to us. It's if we are as strict as we can possibly be, we're going to keep those numbers down below the 2% mark, and we really need to do that.
Dan, I have another question for you. So just off the top of your head, do you know flavor versus tobacco flavor, the percentage that you sell maybe monthly? Like,
what I can do is I can tell you that tobacco it's in the top 10 flavours, but things like strawberry, menthol, vanilla, you know, your fruit menthols, they're your top 4 or 5 by a considerable amount. Now, obviously, I tend not to sell into the convenience sector, and I know there is a difference there, but there's plenty of research out there. In fact, there's some research released quite recently where they've looked at the initiation flavours. So back in 2013, 2014, you know, most people did tend to start with a tobacco or a menthol flavour. But what we found is that over time, now we've got so many more flavours available on the market, and back in 2013, 2014, there wasn't as many juices as there are now. You know, as we've seen the rise in the number of flavours and the premium juices, we also saw the same rise in the number of people successfully making the switch to vaping. And the research is out there. You know, a lot of people will tell you that the flavour makes the nicotine more palatable, it's less harsh, it's easier. Some people will tell you that, yeah, we started out with a tobacco flavour because we thought, oh, we wanted to mimic smoking. But actually, as you get into it, we realise tobacco doesn't taste very nice, which is quite easy to measure because there are no other food products on the entire market that are tobacco flavour. If tobacco was a nice flavour, we'd be going out buying, oh, yeah, nice tobacco flavoured drink. That's great, isn't it? But it's not. It tastes like shit. Right? Other people, you know, purely don't want to be reminded of smoking. They say, I've moved away from smoking. Why would I want to do something that reminds me of it? Because, you know, that just makes me feel like I might want to go and smoke again. So there's many, many reasons. And it's not saying that everybody won't vape tobacco. There will always be people that do, for whatever their own personal reasons, but we need to have that broad selection available to encourage and to assist as many smokers as possible to have that successful quit.
so to play devil's advocate a little bit, So obviously, yes, Juul came in with a very high percentage nicotine, and you made a great point, Dan, speaking on the fact that for a smoker, that is not as aggressive, but for someone who's never used any kind of nicotine product, who's getting that head rush, it's very easily to overconsume. Now, here in the UK, you have the 2% limit. Do you find that smokers here in the UK might have a little bit more trouble if they're just limited to that 2%? Do you see the results that, like, I'm someone who does use nicotine salts. I use combustible tobacco. I've tried every vape product you could ever imagine pretty much in the world, and it wasn't until I found something that was a little more easy, compact, just convenient for me to work and kick the habit. So how do you think you're at a disadvantage, or maybe do you consider this a predatory product that shouldn't be in the market? What are your thoughts on that? The 2% versus the 5%, what you have here in the UK and what we're able to access in the US?
Well, I think the consumers here are used to those lower nicotine levels, so they're not having that experience. Now, I think it could do it being a little bit higher than the 2%. But
what would you suggest?
I'd probably go maybe to 30, and I think that would probably cover most.
Does anyone agree with that? 2.5, 3, yeah.
But I think going back to Dan's point earlier, I think a couple of areas where we have to be really careful in this country is around youth access to our products. And Dan touched on it. If you've got a website that says click here if you're over 18, please invest some money and make it harder for people to get in.
So what are age verification platforms that you suggest to anyone maybe here that's selling on an e-commerce model?
You need to look at something that's verifying it on electoral rolls, on credit cards, something that can at least verify the
Sign
rate.
On delivery?
Sign on delivery is fine, but what we found is it doesn't really work. Most of these deliveries are just made without a signature being needed, or it's left next door, or it's left in some cases. Because I think we've done some test purchasing and that it just
Have
doesn't work.
you? Did they fail?
Yes. But the other area I think that we really need to be careful of is we're all responsible for what happens in our stores, and frankly, we're not doing a good job. The BBC, the news stations are going out regularly doing stings on stores. A third of these stores are failing.
Now, may I ask, are these vape shops, smoke and vape shops, C-stores?
They're going to both.
So all of the above?
Yeah. So,
okay,
for
because
instance, the BBC will send in a 16-year-old that looks about 18.
Right.
But they are 16. If you aren't checking ID, please start doing so, because this is going to come back and bite you in the ass.
Are there penalties for selling to a minor?
There are if it's done by trading standards, but it's not if it's done by a TV station. But where it does hurt you is they put that on the evening news, and next thing, we're all selling to children. That's what they see.
Are there harsh penalties?
I'm not quite sure. Dan, do you know what the penalties are on that one?
It's the same as tobacco. It could be up to £2.5 grand, but normally they just give a £90.
Is there
Up to 90, up from 90 to $2.5 grand. But
well, the money is one thing, but are they suspended from selling tobacco for any period of time?
No.
So in certain counties in Los Angeles, it's a very serious offense, and these stores could have to shut down and no tobacco sales. And if 80% of your catalog is that product, you can't operate. So in the U.S., we've noticed it's mainly the C stores, the convenience stores, that have been the bad actors in this. It's the vape shops and the smoke and vape shops that have been the gatekeepers in preventing the youth from obtaining access to these products. Of course, that's not what's being reported, but...
Well, I think that the difference, too, in the States is both the store and the employee get fined as well.
Correct.
And in fact, in some of the states that I worked with over there, the employee would actually get arrested and taken to jail there and then on the spot if they sell cigarettes. So that's taking a little bit too far. But I think we just need to be careful of what we're doing here. The other area that we need to take a look at too is the branding of our products. Dan touched on flavors are great. We love flavors, but some of the graphics that are out there.
Isn't it crazy that we're still
nuts.
Talking about this? We're still
nuts.
talking about irresponsible packaging in 2019 when we self-regulated or attempted to? Sorry, go ahead.
But it's still a problem out there. We see it every day. But it's things like that are going to get this industry into trouble. It's going to be what society shuts us down for if we're not careful. So please take care of that. One of the things that we've done as the UKVIA is all our members have signed up to what we call Challenge 25. So if you look under 25, we will look for ID. We also have now implemented our own secret shopper program. So all of our members have to sign up to be randomly selected for a secret shopper. And if they fail, then, we need to deal with that. And yes, some of them do still fail. So, everybody's got work to do here, but it's just taking that responsibility for what you're doing in your own stores.
So, Dan, and I'm curious, when you're deciding on products to bring in, labeling and responsible packaging and marketing, is that something that you look at?
Yeah, it is. It is to a point. But the problem you've got is one person in a market doesn't change a market. Now, I'm going to be really honest. I don't believe that any kid is going out and buying a product because it's got a picture of a bunny rabbit on it, right? To be completely honest, the kids that are buying these products are doing it to try and look more adult. So they don't, but these are the things that grab headlines. These are the things that will be used against us in the long run to tell you you're trying to attract children to use your products, right? Nobody wants that headline. In your heart of hearts, you're creating a product intended for adults to help someone stop smoking. And it's a bloody good thing to do. But don't give them the fuel to the fire. Don't allow them to turn around and say, well, look, you put this cartoon character on the front. Obviously, you want children to use it, don't you? Right? It's counterproductive, and it is going to become more and more the narrative. Unfortunately, we have seen, what's her name, Sally Davis, the ex-chief medical officer, spouting on about, I think we should do flavour bans like the US. We did see what is it with people called Davies? Glyn Davies, the MP, saying the same thing. Unfortunately, they will pick up on what's happening in the States. They run with it. Obviously, the States have got a problem. We could have a problem too. Oh, God, I've seen this thing on the BBC. Children are buying vape products. We're in a terrible situation. We need to do everything we can to protect ourselves. But it's got to take the whole industry. Because, one shop can take products off the shelf. Sometimes all you're doing is doing yourself a disfavour because actually the consumers want that product. It's a great flavour, it's a great product, and it's helping them stay off from smoking. And as a retailer, you have to weigh that up. If your customers that are over 18, are ex-smokers, are using that product, then it's still a viable product. But it's the comeback that we're going to have on this, maybe 5, 6, 7 months, who knows when it will come, but it will bite us in the backside much the same way it's biting everyone in the US in the backside.
All right, I want to ask a question, and it's a little sensitive. So you've been to this show before, right? Okay, and I love this show, but we have a bit of a reputation here. Of course, our consumers are very passionate and get very excited, but obviously it's a giveaway-heavy show. Everyone who's seen the consumer days, we know what happens on the main stage. We try to touch on advocacy, but it's really about just getting product in people's hands. Do you find that to be problematic, and what can we do moving forward to improve and continue this conversation and making, really making allies of the consumers and pushing this narrative? Because at this point, we need every voice that we can get. It's not just the industry professionals. We need the consumers speaking on behalf, especially the UK consumers, who I find to be pretty educated when it comes, even just as a hobbyist vapor, in the narrative of vaping. So what can we do better as a show moving forward?
I would say to start off with that we
just say it. Be honest.
We talk a lot to.
I want to hear what you talk about behind closed doors.
We talk a lot to public health groups, and we know that they've been to these events, and we know that in the past they've had no problem with it. But that's not a reason to say that they won't change their minds in the future. There's this thing about what Dan and John both said about kids getting hold of e-cigarettes and then it being on the BBC Evening News. I mean, that makes us go, oh, here we go again, because we talk to politicians, we talk to policymakers, we talk to public health, and you just think you're getting somewhere, and then this big publicity comes out, and then you're getting questions saying, but these kids are getting hold of them. And no politician wants to defend an industry that looks like it's selling to children.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one to fight.
So it just knocks us back, and then we have to just rebuild over and over again. So I don't think there's anything wrong with these things. Some people don't like them, but I think it's a niche in the market, and it, like you said, I don't think kids buy because of the packaging. They like to be older, but at the same point, you need to defend this industry by making sure the kids don't get it, because if that happens, the publicity comes out, and then people are starting to call for all this to be scrapped, and no one wants to see that. So it takes a lot of responsibility from all sides to make sure it doesn't happen.
Well, how do we do a better job of promoting and supporting the good actors in this industry?
Well, I think one of the things about shows like this is it's a certain segment of the industry. But we've got to remember that there's an awful lot of consumers out there that don't go to vape shows that vape. But one of the challenges that we have, especially when we're in front of the media, is they pull out a picture of somebody blowing big clouds and go, that's not socially acceptable. Which is usually when I pull out a smaller pod system and go, you won't even notice if I'm using this. But that's what they see. They see this youthful appearance to the industry, and I think that's not helping. But I think the other thing that we need to really understand is we're trying to convince the 7 million people that are still smoking to use this product. So we need to give them a more fact-based approach, a more fact-based message than, oh, look at this fruity flavor that I can blow big clouds from. So I think we just need to be careful of the tone that we use in our advertising and our messaging to try and convince those 7 million people that this is a good thing for them to do.
I agree with you. Dan, did you want to comment, or are you good?
I think you covered
Okay.
it pretty well.
So this is something, obviously, that we're dealing with in the U.S., and you have a much different situation here, but I do want to address it. Of course, the Center for Disease Control has taken their time in truly addressing a lot of these lung disease concerns. Now, the first week it started with 5 people, and then it was 7, and then someone died, and it's absolutely awful. But it took months for them to truly acknowledge the root cause of what we're dealing with. And at this point, as of today, it is so convoluted because it's coming from every angle. There was a nicotine circumstance where someone had a pre-existing condition. Now, of course, we have the tainted, unregulated, unlicensed THC cartridges, which are rampant throughout the U.S. But if you look at the numbers, and there is a demographic there of the type of person that is falling ill to these causes. But now we have a reputable CBD company that has turned around and used synthetics and has caused harm to people. So now we have 3 different industries looking at one another and pointing blame. Again, I know that you don't have the same legalization here in the UK, but with CBD and protecting that market as well, what are your thoughts on protecting each individual industry and steering that narrative so that way one doesn't tarnish the other?
I think what the CBD, or the CDA and the FDA have done in the US is diabolical.
Oh, the CDC,
or the CDC, sorry. I think I looked at the numbers this morning, and now it's 94% that it's this illegal THC based products.
And they knew that from day one.
Oh, they knew it back in August. They knew this. But I think what's happening in the US is you've got so many different factions that have their purse strings involved in this. And the one that most people here don't understand is the MSA payments.
You want to talk about the master settlement agreement?
I love the master settlement
Sure.
agreement.
Why don't you tell? I mean, let's talk about that.
Right. For most of you that don't know about it, it's a $246 billion cherry that's been dangled in front of the state since 1994, and it was a payment the tobacco companies made basically for states to go away and leave them alone. They were going through lawsuits and would have had to post a $100 billion cash bond to take it to the Supreme Court.
Cigarettes are killing so many Americans.
Exactly.
But just to remind everyone, our public healthcare system, we have our patients are customers. So
yeah,
it's a little different than how you guys deal with health here.
Yeah, I think you've got 4 corporations in the US that own the entire healthcare system. Absolutely ridiculous. But anyway, so these payments are being made on cigarette volume. So this is over and above any taxes that they receive.
Because the government makes money on every single cigarette sold.
They make the most money on every single cigarette. So, so like for instance, when a shipment of cigarettes leaves Philip Morris's depot, for instance, the federal government gets something like $500 million posted directly into their bank account. But anyway, what happened in 2008, 2009, we had a financial crash in the US, which made it extremely difficult for states to borrow money. So a few states came up with this bright idea to sell 10-year bonds based on their MSA payments and their future MSA payments. And that worked fine for a few years.
Because cigarettes were still selling.
Cigarettes were still selling, and selling relatively at the same volume. Now, along comes this Yeah, along comes this thing called electronic cigarettes, and all of a sudden, tobacco volumes in the US decline and decline rapidly. So they go from about a 0.5% to 1% decline up to 3, 4, 5%. Nobody expected that, but unfortunately now these 10-year bonds have either come to be repaid or come up for repayment this year. The states don't have the money. So what they need to do is get America smoking again. And I think this is where some of this pressure to ban vaping is coming in.
If you look at the states that have pushed so quickly and the hardest are the ones that took out the most bonds.
Funny enough, it happens
California,
to be
New York,
New York and California. So, there's lots of different things in there. The other thing you need to look at is the decline in the sale of patches, gums,
which are all made by our friends from Big Pharma.
Exactly. And we even noticed this, 2 years ago when we started doing our Vaping Awareness Month here. The first letter that we got 24 hours before we launched was from Johnson & Johnson. It was an 8-page letter telling us all of the things that we couldn't do with advertising that. Needless to say, we ignored it and just did it anyway.
Why would Johnson & Johnson send you a letter?
Because they decided that most of the things that we were doing were contravening the TPD regulations around advertising of vaping products. But we're a trade organization. So we weren't pushing a single product. We were pushing the concept of vaping as a safer alternative. And we stuck to very closely to the quotes from public health and those from our health bodies. So we knew there was nothing we could get into trouble for. But we were lucky in two ways. We had our politicians decided that they wanted to kick it off. So I think Johnson & Johnson got a bit annoyed that we were going to have several politicians outside Parliament holding up a big banner talking about vaping, which was fantastic.
And maybe you could tell me a little bit of this, because in America we buy our politicians. I don't know if you've seen the actor we have as our president. Is it pay for play here, or what's the deal?
No, we run what we call an all-party parliamentary group. So this is a group of MPs that are interested in a certain subject, and they get together with experts and talk about it. So we help facilitate that.
So you don't have Johnson & Johnson in anyone's pocket, like pushing their narrative?
No, this is all voluntary. These MPs are doing it because they're interested in the subject or they're getting behind it. So that's one of the huge differences here. We don't have the multi-million-pound lobbying groups that you do in the UK or the different PACs that have their own agendas. So the MPs here that are behind vaping are behind it because they actually believe in it. And that's one of the things that we try and do as an organization, is protect that goodwill. And again, when something happens in the press, the first thing they do is call us and say, what are you guys doing about this? And that's where, youth prevention, the imagery we use, they are concerned about that. And that's what they came to us and said, what are you guys doing to offset that? But I think there's just so many things at play in the US that have absolutely nothing to do with the health message about this, that luckily we don't have going on in this country. You want to end that, guys?
I'd just say that this is why this campaign and our campaign, which is going to be called Trust Vaping in the next couple of weeks, are very important, because as John said, policymakers can be nervous about this. But I'd like to remind all of you that back in 2010, the government here was threatening to ban e-cigarettes within 21 days. And the only thing that stopped them was thousands of vapers writing to the consultation and telling their stories and saying, leave these things alone.
Has that stopped?
Well, this was a specific consultation.
Okay.
But they had to listen to that. So, there's lots of consumers probably think everything's fine in this country, there's no problem, it's all happened in the US, our government trusts us, our government loves us. But that can change just like that. So all of these threats coming in, all of these people talking about maybe banning flavours, the most powerful people in this whole debate are consumers. So please make yourself heard. Use the hashtags. Get them on Instagram. Get them on Facebook. Get them on Twitter. Wherever social media you can get them on. And get a big message out there. Leave the flavours alone. Leave our e-cigarettes alone.
Yeah, just to follow on from John's point, it's always about the dollar. If this was genuinely about public health, the narrative would be very different. Every argument you hear about the youth epidemic, it always comes back to smoking. It might be a gateway to smoking. We don't want the children to end up smoking. They're going to go from vaping to smoking. If smoking's the bad guy here, why are none of these debates about banning tobacco? It's very simple. That's, we know our public health, our Royal College of Physicians, so let's point out, well, they were the first people to point out that smoking was bad for you. So for them to nail their colours to the mast and say, yeah, as far as we know right now, vaping is 95% less harmful than smoking, it's a big thing. And what's happening now in the States, which really fucks me off, is that you've got people like Stanton Glantz trying to put down our public health professionals for talking the truth.
Don't worry, I've defended them.
And yeah, it's an absolute crying shame. But unfortunately, on top of all the master settlement agreements, on top of everything else, you got people like Glantz who forged their entire career about being anti-tobacco. And now that people are moving away from tobacco and they're starting to vape, and actually that's looking quite successful, where's he going to get his fucking money from in the future? So he still needs to be anti-something, and of course now vaping is the new anti. So, it's this horrible circle. But if it was really about public health, we'd be talking about the truth, we'd be talking about the facts, and we'd be getting the narrative back to the fact that smoking kills 50% of the people that do it. And we're letting this narrative change here, where we should be talking about the benefits of vaping and the negative aspects of smoking. We find ourselves trying to desperately cling to defend vaping and to defend, the fact it's for adults and kids shouldn't have it, etc. And that focus shifts away from the fact that vaping is 95% less harmful than smoking. And as we say, there's people now trying to push this agenda that, well, smoking might kill you in 20 years, vaping will kill you in 2. It's bullshit. And this, we need to shout, and we need to shout from the rooftops at every available moment that you get, that smoking is deadly, smoking will kill you, and this product is multitudes less harmful.
So it's disheartening to see this across the board, because obviously being in the U.S. and in California, I've been bombarded with it every single day. It's a new article, it's a new post. You got the president tweeting about it, and so I look to our international neighbors, specifically you here in the UK, for intelligence and guidance and understanding. Now with TPD. Obviously, a lot of people had the jump with the short fills, but it was a true, honest attempt at regulating and being responsible. Did you find TPD to be, in your personal opinion, the first TPD to be a success in how it's allowed this industry to have a regulatory phase? And even though, we've combated with some other things, what is your personal opinion?
Yeah, it's far more of a success than it was a failure. A lot of us, especially pre-TPD, we were worried about a lot of the rules being put in place. And there still are rules in there which need to change. The fact that short fills exist is entirely because a 10ml bottle is not convenient.
It's also very wasteful.
Yeah, it's massively wasteful. David Attenborough does not like us, right? But it's not convenient. The whole point about vaping, to be successful, it needs to be convenient. It needs to be as convenient as going into a shop and buying a packet of fags and lighting a cigarette, And all of the rules that were put in place at the time, a lot of it seemed to make vaping less convenient and less easy, and therefore less easy for someone to make the switch.
Out of curiosity, does anyone have a 10 ml bottle on them?
Yeah,
anyone? Anyone have a TPD compliant 10 ml bottle? A single person here. I get it. Yeah. DIY. One. Okay, we got a few. All right. Are they salts? Okay.
But on the back of all of that, what we did get was we got a great regulatory position where all of our products were tested. They've gone through the toxicological information. We've got the dossier. Everything's registered, etc., etc. And we can be incredibly confident about what is in those products. And even short fills are still covered by general product safety regulations.
Yeah, they all go through emission testing, right? And toxicology reports, everything.
Yeah, and
they're supposed to, correct.
It is a loophole, okay? And we do know that there are people who probably are still mixing shit in bathtubs, etc., etc. But the
is that really still happening here?
Yeah, well, there's little pockets in Manchester potentially and all the rest of it. But
forget
about that side of things for the moment, right? The point is that when you're buying your products and you're buying them off of a reputable manufacturer, you've got your MSDS sheets, you've got your emission tests. We've created a position where we can genuinely say to our customers, we know what's in this product, we know that it's safe, it's been tested, you're not going to have any problems. And that has come through the regulations. So no, they're not perfect, But I would rather be sitting here now with them and in the position that we are now than unfortunately being in the position in the States where they talked about regulations 3 years ago and you're still waiting for some guidance on what the hell you're actually supposed to do to get through them.
Yeah, it's mind-numbing when you sit across from a politician and they sit there and look you in the eyes and say, we don't know what's in this. I said, we do know what's in this.
I'd say I agree. About the TPD, we fought against it a lot around the time it came out.
What were you fighting against?
Well, I mean, originally it was really draconian. They were talking about having a maximum limit of 4 milligrams for the nicotine, for example. So what came out, although we did have a lot of gripes about it at the time, looking back, I mean, at the time, I remember we spoke to a certain person in public, quite influential, I won't mention the person's name, but they said, this TPD can help me go to the WHO and say, this is how regulation can work. And at the time, we thought that was just balderdash, But
Sorry, I'm not from here. What's the WHO?
World Health Organization.
Oh, there we go.
Who are very anti-vaping. But it is true that, people who are on our side from public health can talk to the WHO and say, well, look what's happened in the UK. Look what's happened in Europe. So there are many things that has been very useful for. We've still got gripes about the 20 milligram limit.
Is there a lot of kickback from that?
No, we had a bit of fun with it a while ago because Action on Smoking on Health came out and they said we've done a survey and only 9% of vapers use more than 20 milligrams when the TPD came out, and we crunched the figures and found out that was about 200,000 people. So we put out a press release saying, so Ash obviously don't care about 200,000 people who
It's funny how they play with numbers like that, right?
So we still think that can go up higher. Like the gentleman over there said, 24, maybe 30 would be something that would be more attractive to smokers. And the bottles have got to go, 10 millibit. They've caused more problems than they've solved. But they haven't solved any problem. But apart from that, it's generally something that we can point to. And when we have people saying things against vaping, we can say, look at the regulations. These regulations are working. And other countries look at us and think they've got it right. So in hindsight, there are, like Dan said, more successes than failures.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything that's been said. I think now we're starting to see the benefits of it when people are pointing to the UK and going, you see what reasonable regulation looks like and how it's saving us. So I think that's been a buffer for us in these issues that we're having right now. But rest assured, I don't think we've seen the last of regulation, and I think we'll probably see more on the safety aspects of our products. So it wouldn't surprise me if we don't see the registration of short fills coming down the line. I think, we shouldn't resist that. I think that's a good thing because it's going back to your point earlier on. It's proving what's in our products. We're proving that these products are safer to use. So we shouldn't resist that. I think you'll also probably see, I'd say within the next year or so, you'll probably see the licensing of vape stores. And I think what that will do is it will give us more credibility, I think, on the high street and more credibility with our policymakers to say there are some things in place to make sure retailers are following a set criteria around safety, around youth prevention. So I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see a push for that. The good thing is, and a lot of this comes from the evidence that we gave to the Science and Technology Committee, there is a push to get rid of 10 ml bottles. They don't make sense to anybody. They fly in the face of the government's single-use plastic initiatives.
Yeah, I was curious. It's not normal in the U.S., so I want to ask for vape shops here to have any kind of recycling program?
There's very, very little recycling done. Because it's got nicotine in it, it's very hard to recycle. But there's also pushes to do recyclable bottles. All that fun stuff is happening in the background with some companies. But the biggest issue I think that we have in this country is around advertising. And one of the challenges that we found when we came to do our Facts Not Fiction press release, we went to the papers and said, this is what we want to do. We're a trade association. They went, no, TPD says you can't do it. I said, but we're not pushing a product. We're pushing facts, not fiction. We had to go through 4 different sets of lawyers. We had the ASA saying that they wouldn't sign off on it, so most of the major newspapers wouldn't do it. So we were lucky. We got the Metro to do it nationwide for us, and the BBC caught wind of it. and did a little piece on that. It ran on the morning news from 6 o'clock in the morning till 9 a.m. every half hour.
Did anyone see it?
That the UKVIA was pushing out this print media campaign. It was seen by 6.2 million people. Now all of the press companies are coming to us going, oh, can we have a bit of this action now? We don't care if the ASA will prove it. You know, so we have to push these boundaries, but we've got to do it in a sensible and reasonable way. Otherwise, we're going to be in trouble.
So I want to talk a little bit about some innovative technology that I've noticed. In America, we're going through pre-market authorization, the PMTA process, and earlier in the year, IQOS passed PMTA. I see it often here in Europe, but we're finally seeing the effects in the States. Now here we have something that's readily available, and unfortunately, as some states and cities are having to deal with, shops are having to wipe their shelves clean, which is devastating to watch. But it makes plenty of room for products like this that are approved by the FDA. I would love your opinion on products like the IQOS.
Well, the NNA might be different from lots of people here because we
I want your opinion.
We encourage all safer nicotine products, so we don't have a problem with IQOS or snus or anything else. If
it goes a little bit backwards?
If it considerably reduces harm from smoking, then we're generally in favour of it. So, but that's because we are tobacco harm reduction rather than just vaping. Some we talk to a lot of European consumer associations, and some of them don't want anything to do with anything that comes from tobacco company because they're purely vaping.
Right. I mean, it's heat, not burn, but is
reduction.
It really that much more significant?
I think it's considerable. I think that the Committee on Toxicology said it's something like 50 to 90% safer. So it's in its early years, and in places like Japan, Korea, places like that, it's having massive success.
Oh yeah, I see it all over Russia. Now, not just those, but I've also seen, when I was here in May, a company from Manchester on stage had brought, it's the same type of battery device, except these are not rechargeable. They're totally disposable, which breaks my heart. But they're the filters that absorb the e-liquid. What are your thoughts on that? Is there testing on that? Are those safe? What are we looking at?
Well, I think from my opinion, it's all part of a smoker's journey into something different. Now, to me, I agree with Martin. It's whatever works best for them. But I think what you'll find is a certain proportion of those smokers will go with something like an IQOS because it's the closest thing to smoking, a cigarette that they can do. But ultimately, they probably will end up in our vape stores because what they're looking for is change. They're looking for doing something different. And one thing I find with smokers that switch to vaping, they no longer see themselves as smokers. So they like these flavors because they don't want to be reminded by a tobacco flavor of what they previously did. Well, exactly, they can taste these things. But I think, for a smoker that maybe isn't comfortable with vaping, maybe IQOS will work for them, and that's fine. So they may stay on IQOS for a while, and they either will like that device, or they'll move on to vaping at some stage when they want to try different flavors or different experiences. So I think it's just all part of that journey, whether it be a patch, a gum, whatever. But what we really just need to focus on is getting these 7 million people to stop doing what's killing them. We're losing 220 people a day in the UK from smoking-related illness, and that's just crazy.
I'm not going to talk about IQOS.
Why?
I don't know the science behind it. I'm a vaping advocate. And
yes, that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah, and I don't want to put a product down, but I didn't like it personally. But I mean, it's one of those situations where I in my heart of hearts, I do tend to agree with Martin. If it's a product that stops somebody from smoking, then it's good. But I'm a vaping
It's the lesser
advocate.
of the evils.
I know the science behind vaping. I know why it's 95% less harmful than smoking, and I fully support it. I'm not a fan of heat not burn personally. I think it's a lot of faff. I think having to carry around essentially a vape device, but then also carrying around a box of fags. It's quite funny. I've seen people trying to light them in the pub afterwards when they've run out of battery. But all of that stuff regarding, if it's a product that helps somebody not smoke, then essentially I'm for it. But I personally would always extol the virtues of vaping. We have the science. We've got a lot of science. People keep going, we don't know it. No, we've got decades of science on this. And it's going to keep getting better. That science will keep getting worked on. John mentioned that, there probably will be further discoveries, there'll be certain flavourings which we just find that probably are best not to include, etc. And that will get blown up at the time. They'll be going, oh my God, look at this in the papers. But realistically, all we're doing is we're going from 95% less harmful to 96 to 97 to 98. And by the time we are 20 or 30 years into this, we're going to have a product that you cannot argue with, and hopefully by that point, the number of vapors will be dwarfing the number of smokers anyway.
All right, gentlemen, closing thoughts. How can we support you? What do we do next? I know we've got this movement here, and we'll make sure anyone who would like one of these, the Facts Not Fiction, Truth, yes, right over here in the corner. You can visit our friends over here. Anything you'd like to leave on?
Well, yeah, as a consumer myself, and I'm chair of a consumer association, I would, some people would say, you would say that this, but please, vapers, consumers, you are incredibly important. You carry a lot of weight with politicians and with public health. Please make your voice heard. Join in with these campaigns as much as you can. Spread the word. And I mean, just one last thing. I mean, all these bad stories coming from America. Can I just ask how many of you have been contacted by friends or family and told to quit vaping because of it? Yeah, quite a few. I was getting emails when the moment this sort of thing started breaking from people saying you should quit that, it's dangerous, so this is the thing, we don't want that happening. How many people have been put off using e-cigarettes because of this? So we need to get out that it's not the flavours of the problem, the flavours are what is helping us, it's what's keeping us off of the cigarettes, and get that message out there and just spread it as widely as you can. So please join in with the campaigns, both this one, Vaping Matters, and our one, which is going to be called Trust Vaping, and just get the message out there as widely as possible.
Yeah, I think I agree with Martin on that. We're all in this together, whether we believe it or not. And what I would say is if you're a company that's involved in the vaping industry, get involved in a trade association, whether it's us or anybody else. We really are out there trying to help you guys. We need to get behind the consumers and get them focused on us. So all of the materials we have, if you don't get an opportunity to do this here today, it will be available for download on our website, and we'll have it for the NNA as well to download.
How many of these did you bring?
We've got 1,000 over there right now. And then, as I said, we can print these off, put them in your stores, talk to your consumers about it, use the Vaping Matters hashtag, and let's get this moving and get the non-smokers and the general public to understand that this is not about young people. One of the things that we've got on there is how old am I, right? I want to see people my age getting involved in this and telling their story of how many years they've smoked and how vaping got them off and what flavor got you off, right? Flavors are here for adults, so let's tell the people about it.
Absolutely.
And obviously the last thing I'm going to say is it's related. Now, what we really need here is we need a public health campaign. We need to get that message out to the vapers who've moved back to smoking, to the smokers who were considering switching to vaping, who've now been put off by these scare stories, etc. And that needs to come from our public health bodies. And we, as an association, as an industry, we can talk to these guys all day long. There's always that worry from their point of view that, well, you're an industry. Of course you want us to do this. You've got a financial benefit to it. What we need is we need consumers to be writing to Public Health England and to the Department of Health and to the MHRA and telling them, we need you to tell the public the truth here. Like, they're holding back. They know, Martin Dockrell will come out and do fantastic interviews, the guy from Public Health England, but they're not putting out a coordinated campaign just yet. And that's the only way that we're really going to be able to counteract all this negativity in the media. It's the only way we're going to be able to push those truthful facts out there. They're not going to be told they can't put adverts in newspapers, right, like we are. So again, just as when the NNA and several other groups were campaigning against the medicinal regulation of these products, when we were campaigning against some of the initial problems with the TPD, we were told that facts and figures go a long way, but personal stories go so much further to a politician, right? And if they get hundreds or thousands of letters or emails coming through, you know, telling them your experiences, how you feel, or the problems that you're seeing. Even if you know people who have gone back to smoking, ask them to write the letters to say, I was vaping, I've gone back to smoking because of this news. And we need to put the pressure on them to actually work for the good of public health.
Of course.
Just a one-sentence thing on that. When we were fighting against the TPD, what swayed it was MEPs were saying they'd never had as many letters on a subject as they had about vaping. And that's what changed it. That's what stopped the 4 milligram limit on the nicotine. It's what stopped only being allowed as medicinal products and things like that. It was the amount of vapors writing to their MEP who had never had that level of correspondence before.
There were so many people that tweeted that they were actually accusing bots of being responsible in the U.S., and they just couldn't believe that that many vapors would be pro-vaping. So, and they tried to do an article on it, and they made the mistake of finding a lady in vaping who looked at the bots, the accused accounts, and she's like, I know every single one of these people. Like, these are all real people. Well, gentlemen, Dan Martin, Managing Director of VapeBase. Of course, we have a New Nicotine Alliance. Thank you so much, Martin Cullup. And John Dunne, Director of UK Vaping Industry Association. We appreciate your time and educating us. Let's keep this conversation going. Hashtag Vaping Matters and Trust Vaping. You can visit them right over there in the corner. Get yourself one of these, fill it out, blast it everywhere. We got to do what we can do, and we'll do it united. All right, thank you. We have our next speakers coming up soon. But yes, let's give it up for these gentlemen. So, such a lovely, eloquent job.